Hello, everyone. This is Kaz from Elevate Your Craft, and welcome to episode number 5 of the podcast, which represents something new and something I'm very excited about. So far, the podcast has been focused on speaking with different people that have different expertise, skills, insight, and generating meaningful discussion around that in the hopes that anyone listening can and learn from it and apply something to their own lives and benefit from that overall. The second half represents what I consider my contribution to Elevate Your Craft, and that'll revolve around calisthenics and fitness. So you can look forward to both the podcasts that I do on my own as well as the ones that I feature with different people from all walks of life. My podcasts will vary a little bit because what I want to do is keep them pretty structured and quick to the point and address a few issues or just different subject matter under calisthenics and move on. Whereas with the podcast where I speak to the guests, I like to let the conversations grow organically and let the speakers do their thing and offer as much insight as possible. So these ones will be shorter, more to the point, and focus on, I usually go about probably 2 to 3 different points and then go from there. And the overall idea of this as well is to promote calisthenics not only as a viable but a very effective training method. And the standards have always been there: push-ups, pull-ups, bodyweight squats. But what I feel is lesser known is the idea of approaching it in a progressive way. For instance, you look at push-ups and you have your standard, and if you regress, you can go to incline push-ups. Or if you were to progress, you could go to things like close push-ups or uneven push-ups, lever push-ups, one-arm variations, and things like that. And that really applies to any type of exercise with calisthenics. And no matter what level of fitness you're at, it offers a great and viable way to build strength and muscle. And just to address, too, this certainly isn't to denigrate any other forms of training. It's merely to offer insight into a form of training that I am passionate about, I think offers great value for anyone, and just to inform people about it and hopefully promote the community as a whole as well. So that's a general overview of the podcast as a whole. Today's episode will focus on 5 different areas. The first, of course, being the intro that I've just described, but the second leads into transitioning to calisthenics. So things that I've found useful in my experience and insight that I hope will help people as they transition to calisthenics and even early on in their training. The third part is the appeal of calisthenics. So things that I find really great about it and things that I think other people who haven't necessarily incorporated it into their lives would find appealing about it as well. And the fourth is challenges faced. So things that I've seen in my practice so far, any challenges, any insight that I can provide based on those challenges. So hopefully people can learn about them and then avoid any pitfalls or anything like that throughout their training. And then the last part will kind of focus on different resources and some final thoughts that I have for the podcast. So beginning with the transition to calisthenics, it all came about for me because of martial arts training, actually. I trained in capoeira 3 to 4 years ago at Ashe Capoeira in Toronto. Awesome bunch of people. And during that training, I was really looking for ways to just gain strength and improve that way. Capoeira is a very demanding martial art in unique ways because you're not always on your feet. You also incorporate a lot of movements on your hands. So handstands, for instance, are very big. And that proved to be very, very challenging for me. So I was looking for ways to gain strength outside of the studio when I wasn't training. I didn't have a big apartment at the time. Space was limited. I wasn't part of a gym. So I was just looking for a way to improve. and I came across convict conditioning, which, if you ask many different calisthenics enthusiasts out there, that's how it all started for them. I did a lot of research, and at the time, there wasn't too much that I was aware of in terms of resources, but that book definitely got it started for me, Convict Conditioning by Paul Wade. And it all started from there. I was immediately hooked and got right into it. So just a few pointers for transitioning to calisthenics. The first is keep a journal. And I didn't keep one immediately when I started because I was kind of just all taking it in. There was a lot to learn. I knew very little about it, but I decided to begin keeping a journal. And I would definitely advise anyone, no matter what type of training you're doing, to keep a journal, at least for a certain period of time. What it does is it focuses on, or it forces you to focus on the different aspects of your routine, and it also trains you to really keep all of that in mind. It helps you monitor your progress and really understand what kind of approach you're taking, why you're working out, exactly what you want, the sets, the reps, the exercises you're doing. It could even go into how you're feeling at the time, before the workout, during the workout, after the workout. It's really a great way to just hone down on what you're doing, and then as you look back too, you can see what you've done and really monitor your progress closely. And it's really nice to be able to look back. Say a year go into your training, you go ahead and look back and think, wow, how much I've improved and things like that. So that would be the first really important point that I would offer in transitioning to calisthenics. And for a lot of people, it's something that's completely new. The idea of weight training, with weights, whether it's in a gym, I think in general is more familiar of a topic for people, whereas the progressive calisthenics and things like that, I think, and at least it was for me, was completely new. So there was a lot to take in, and keeping a journal really helped manage all that. And as I learned new things, I would figure out ways or come up with ways that I could incorporate them into my training. So journal, definitely a great idea. Second would be find whatever resources you can learn from. And this goes back to just not knowing much about it at the time, and it was very compelling to me. I really loved it. It was a new concept, and I enjoyed the training. So it was a matter of finding everything I could out there. And, this applies to, of course, many different types of training, is learning as much as you possibly can about it, especially if it's really, really new. YouTube then and is still a huge resource for me and a great way for people to showcase what they can do, different progressions and things like that. There's some great books out there and media, which I will go over a little bit later in the podcast, but learn as much as possible because, you'll never know everything, and the more you know about it, the more you can actually advance and customize your routines. The third is be patient. And this is something that I really came to grips with, I'd probably say a couple years ago, but things might not go as quickly as you hope. And by things, I mean progression. It really depends on a lot of things, but if I can offer some of my own insight into that, some exercises you'll progress quicker than others. For example, for me, it was, the quick ones were push-ups and squats. Yeah, I did really well with them. I felt and feel very confident in them. But what was tougher for me, and I would still say is a bit slower even now, is pull-ups. It's a very challenging exercise to begin with, but you need to become patient. Of course, results don't come overnight, but just to realize that you may progress quickly in some things, whereas others, they just take some time. And if you kind of become comfortable with that, it'll help kind of go day to day consistently, and you'll see results. And just not to get nervous or feel that you're not progressing or hitting plateaus. It's just a matter of staying consistent and sticking to it. So be patient with exercises, understand how you're doing them, and this again this is where the journal helps as well. And just a side note too, I did mention pull-ups, and in any transition to calisthenics, even if you're just incorporating pull-ups into a weight training program, they are very, very intimidating. The pull-up, especially if you're brand new, may seem impossible at the time. And having patience for them is definitely necessary, but just understand too, don't avoid them because they're so difficult. When I started with them, I think I could maybe do 3-4 reps of a standard, shoulder width apart, and this is palm in pull-up. And then from there, I would do 1 or 2 reps max every set. But what I did was I went maybe 9 or 10 sets. So instead of focusing on higher numbers or quantity per set, I would do many sets of as many reps as I could do. And then over time, you just build up the strength and you get better at them. And they don't become as intimidating. So that's a great way to approach it as well. But do not be too intimidated by the pull-up to prevent you from approaching them at all, because, they're very difficult, but at the same time, very rewarding. So moving on to the third part, which is the appeal of calisthenics. The first I would definitely say that I thought of was it's very meditative, and you become really in tune with the body. And all the movements I found felt very connected. Every muscle that you're incorporating in the exercises feels like it's getting the workout. And the idea of isolation wasn't really there. And whether you're truly isolating a muscle, for instance, in a bicep curl, is debatable, but it really moved away from those types of exercises to compound movements, or including as many muscles as possible in the movements. And I think with that, it would appeal greatly to people that enjoy yoga. And it was just an overall very relaxing way to exercise, and a great way to really use your body to its full potential. The second is flexibility. That's always been a challenge with me in my weight training days, and even for a little while into calisthenics, I didn't really focus on flexibility. But as I got more advanced in calisthenics, I found that training flexibility was just a natural next step, or a natural supplement to the training, because range of motion makes just easier to execute the exercises. And I saw that really in pistol squats when I started training those, because to have a limited range of motion in the hips and the hamstrings and calves makes it that much more difficult to execute the movement. So it was a great way to complement the training was by focusing more on flexibility. And as I said, I found it very challenging in my weight training days. And I mean, overall, that comes down to just not focusing on it. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. You could, no matter how you're training, if you don't include flexibility, you will lose the benefits of that kind of training. But for me, I believe it took calisthenics to see that and recognize the true value of it. So even just recognizing the value that exists in training flexibility is very important, and has since made calisthenics even more appealing for me. The third is that it's very minimalistic, and I like that approach because you can achieve great strength with very little. Essentially, I only work out now with parallel bars and a straight bar, and that is awesome for me because it allows you to perform exercises or routines anywhere, whether it's at home, at the park, anywhere. Dropping down when you're waiting somewhere, doing 10 push-ups, that kind of thing. And even more so, with such a minimalist approach, it offers so much variety, which is great because you can customize programs and just include so many different types of workouts into this type of training. And this segues nicely into another, the fourth item that I find very appealing to calisthenics, and that's the body weight theory and theory crafting behind it. So with that minimalist approach, there's so much variety and different things you can do with the exercises, how quickly you're performing them, weight to limb ratio, range of motion, a unilateral versus bilateral workouts. So it's a minimalist approach in terms of equipment and the requirements, but the possibilities are endless, which I find very appealing. And getting more into the body weight theory and theory crafting, that's something that I'll discuss definitely in future podcasts, but even just the variety that exists among that, I think is lesser known and can really be applied to different routines in such a great way. Part 4 is challenges that I've faced so far in my career in calisthenics. And, there'll definitely be more to come, but a few of them, the most significant ones anyway, that I've found that I hope I can offer some insight on for new people or new trainees among calisthenics is the first is knowing when to move on or knowing when to progress to the next exercise. And just the mindset of consistently wanting to improve is necessary, but it's also important to give each progression the time it deserves. Moving too quickly can not only cause injury, but you won't have a great foundation to work from. You always want to train the basics, just like any sport coach will tell you, never get rid of the fundamentals, never stop practicing the fundamentals. And in the case of calisthenics, those are pull-ups, push-ups, and squats. And for me, I've included back bridges into that as well. But never stop training the basics. With that foundation, you'll be able to move on. But some different things that I did, or I have discovered so far in knowing when to move on, is slowly just trying them in your routines. So a lot of the time, if I'm doing, say, 4 or 5 sets of the progression that I'm currently on, what I'll do is on the final set, I will try a progressed version of that variation. So using push-ups as an example, if I was doing 5 sets, on the 5th set, I would try the uneven push-up. So for the first 4, I would do close push-ups, and then the progression to that would be the uneven push-up. So I would give it a shot on the 5th set and use that to really gauge, okay, do I think I'm strong enough to start incorporating this exercise more into my routines, or do I have to stick more to the close push-ups? So that's a really good way to kind of test it out. And one thing further with that is something that might seem kind of counterintuitive, especially those accustomed to using weights to train, is that when moving on to newer and harder progressions, your technique might not be there. And that's okay as long as you are striving to achieve ideal technique. So, and that technical tightening or improving of that technique is progression in and of itself. So it's okay to initially struggle with the technique, but what you want to ensure is that you're slowly building the strength toward achieving that ideal technique. So really gauge that by slowly incorporating it into your routine. Or of course, if you do have a trainer, they should be able to help you incorporate newer or progressed variations of exercises into your routines based on your feedback and when they feel that you can do it. Because watching someone else do a workout is a really good way, or even recording yourself doing a workout is a good way to get sort of a third-person view of how you look while doing it. The second is the second challenge that I thought was fairly significant for me was the idea of symmetry. And this isn't symmetry in the sort of the aesthetic way, looking at your body and seeing just asymmetrical muscles, that the right lat is bigger than the left. And in the case of that, that's how I noticed it, was seeing it. But the broader idea here is focusing on how you're performing the exercises. Because for me specifically, I did mention the right and left lat. How I noticed it is that my right lat was slightly bigger than my left. And I'm thinking, well, how did that happen? And in closer analysis of it, I found that during my pull-ups on the last, 2 or 3 repetitions when I was getting to exhaustion, I would pull more on my dominant side, which seems natural. I mean, we have our dominant sides, whether it's the left or the right. But when I noticed that was a turning point. And that's really what you want to focus on when you're performing the exercises, is really how you're doing them, because you don't want to have those deficiencies in certain areas, at least ideally, at least when you can prevent them, because symmetry or asymmetry will always be there, even to small degrees. Something is slightly, your right pec or is slightly larger than your left, or I wouldn't worry too much about those, especially with strength. The way I kind of consider it is, well, it's just slightly stronger than the other side. So I wouldn't worry about symmetry too much, but the idea of performing the exercises and really focusing on how you're performing them is very important. So I definitely wouldn't give that up. The third wasn't necessarily a challenge specifically to me, but it's a challenge that I think a lot of people who haven't incorporated calisthenics into their workouts may feel. And that's feeling like calisthenics isn't enough. It won't give you the necessary size or the strength that you might want. And I think that comes from just not knowing enough about it. Just not knowing how to approach it in a progressive manner and the possibilities that are out there. And, is my body weight really enough to build the size that I want? Well, that's a matter of how you train. How many reps are you doing? Are you working out to exhaustion with your muscles? But the idea, I believe, comes from just not knowing enough. So, this goes back to in the transitioning to calisthenics, learn as much as possible. And I really think that you'll find there is an absolute ton out there, and it would in some cases be more than enough for your goals. A few things on a final note. I just wanted to go over some calisthenics resources that I've found beneficial throughout my calisthenics journey. I've already mentioned one huge one, and that was Paul Wade's Convict Conditioning. There is a second one, and I believe a third Convict Conditioning is coming out this year, 2015, and that's again by Paul Wade, or Coach Paul Wade, as he's known. Al and Danny Cavadlo have been great resources for me. I've followed them for quite a while now. They've got great books out there like Pushing the Limits, Raising the Bar, Everybody Loves Training, Diamond Cut Abs, just really cool guys, and I think you could learn a ton from them, as I have. And related to them is the PCC, or the Progressive Calisthenics Certification, headed up by, of course, John Duquesne and Al and Danny Cavadlo. Really great time. I went there last year. I believe it was June or July. But great time, awesome people, really gives you a sense of community, and you learn a ton from these guys firsthand. So I definitely recommend you check that out. Others include the Bar Stars. I've followed them on YouTube for a while now and seen their tremendous growth. And they have a ton that you can learn from as well, just really showcasing what the human body is capable of when it comes to calisthenics, but as well as tutorials and that type of thing. Even Calisthenics Canada, really great stuff out there that I encourage you to check out. The second is something that I've found and incorporated more, and on my website, www.elevateyourcraft.net, this is something that I discussed more in an article on there. But I think it's very, very important, especially for people that are just starting out, that want to maintain a consistent routine or are having trouble working out consistently. And that's finding a purpose for what you're doing. So why are you doing it? I think a big challenge for people who are just starting out is they don't really know why. They might have seen something wherever in the media or spoke to someone in their lives that kind of got them going for a little while. But then as soon as a challenge is presented, they kind of lose momentum, and then that's about it. So I really think it's important to establish a purpose and ask yourself the right questions. Why am I doing this? What are the different challenges that I'm going to face? Do I want to do this maybe to perform better at work, to just have more energy to play with my kids, or to feel better day to day? And once those are established, I think it provides the necessary foundation. So when those challenges do pop up, you'll have enough leverage to follow through and keep going. So, a lot of the programs out there that are already kind of pre-made, and whether they're on the internet or you see them on YouTube, a lot of the time they aren't formulated based on your goals. And your goals might not be to be huge or in elite level shape. You might just want to have a good base of strength, but feel better, build some integrity in your joints and gain some muscle and lose some fat. So, kicking your own butt for 2 weeks on a program that might not be the most ideal for you, it will make it very difficult to stay consistent. So really think of your goals and why you're doing it, and I think that'll help you get a great start, but also maintain a consistent routine. So I mentioned the website, www.elevateyourcraft.net. Look for that. Look for different articles related to calisthenics and fitness. I've also got something on there called Train Anywhere, and the idea of Train Anywhere is sort of just that. It's moving away from the idea, or at least embracing, I would say, the idea of being able to use our surroundings to train. Moving away from necessarily having to or needing a certain environment to work out, whether it's the gym or a home gym, and kind of seeing everything around us and encouraging people to train. So look for cool shots in different places of different workouts and routines that you can do in odd or lesser associated places anyway to gyms, whether it's a hotel room or a park, or even using a park bench, just things like that to encourage people to find ways to incorporate being active and incorporate calisthenics into their daily lives. If you like the podcast, you can follow me at EYC Kasumovic on Twitter. I also have a Facebook page, Elevate Your Craft, all one word, and Instagram, EYC Kasumovic. And finally, what I also want to use this podcast for is just to answer any questions that people may have. To whether you post it on Twitter, Facebook, email, however you'd like to do it. Eventually, what I want to do is be able to answer those questions on the podcast and offer any feedback that I can. So I'm really excited about this half of the podcast, but also stay tuned because I'm definitely going to be having a lot more guests and different things to talk about. So for now, that's it for me. Thanks very much, everyone.